So, welcome back. Today, we want to talk about how all these future tech are being used in the fight against the global pandemic called coronavirus or COVID-19.
I know you've talked a lot about converging technologies.
Right.
Can you go into a little bit about all of these components of big tech that are just kind of coming together and how they're being used to address this pandemic that seems to honestly just seems to be like out of the control of every leader and politician. That's just what it seems like to me.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Pam. In fact, this is really a war. They're saying this is a wartime president. And so in a war, we have to use every weapon that's available to us to fight. And luckily, there are all of these technologies that are emerging that are being put into place to fight. And a lot of it originated in China, where, for instance, I know 20 blockchain startups that popped up right in the middle of the pandemic and were really successful in terms of flattening the curve. So just to jump in, why don't we talk about blockchain first?
Yeah.
So I think the main way that blockchain helps here is to identify and track at-risk people and people with immunity. So, for instance, it could enable an accurate database of populations, right? Population level vaccine, history of disease, medical intervention studies, and do all that without any breach of privacy because you're aggregating the data, and improved health outcomes through better data exchange. So there's this one company called Akoer that crafted a dashboard that tracks infections, deaths, recoveries in real time, which prevents information from being manipulated. So good data in, good data out instead of garbage in, garbage out. And then they provide that data to healthcare and life sciences institutes and countries in the general public now. And they're using that, it's powered by Hedera Hashgraph. Mm-hmm. So it's called the Hashlog dashboard.
But when you say they're tracking this data in real time, like how is that still, how does that, maybe I don't know how all that data is already out there, but how are they doing that and preserving privacy at the same time?
Well, I think they're de-identifying the data that's being collected from the individual and aggregating it.
Okay. And you said that China has like 20 startups that are working on it. How does China compare to the US in terms of like adoption in blockchain? Is it like on par, or are we much farther, or are they farther?
They are much further ahead. So before the pandemic happened, President Xi of China made this a priority for the country to be the global leader in blockchain.
Wow.
They were already working on their central bank digital currency, or digital yuan. And so that is much further along than the United States, which only said that they would consider a digital dollar. But this pandemic might have accelerated that for the United States, as it was recently considered in the stimulus package. However, the language was cut, and ultimately it ended up in Congresswoman Maxine Waters and Senator Sherrod Brown's proposals. So it's still out there, but overall, China's way ahead.
Yeah. Well, I think something about blockchain that I still find confusing, and maybe others do as well, is when it says that it prevents information from being manipulated outside of the public eye. What about um, like, so this dashboard is by this company called Accor. Like, what about the company itself that's managing that dashboard? Can they prevent, once they aggregate the data and they de-identify, as you said, is that becomes permanent, and every time somebody attempts to adjust any of the data, that's always going to be like reflected back, like kind of
Right.
like in Google Doc, where every time somebody makes a change, you can see the history.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, if you think about distributed ledger technology in its most basic form, it's like a shared spreadsheet, right?
Hmm.
So yes, I mean, like I add a cell, you add a cell, um, it becomes the document that we're creating.
Hmm.
Everybody can see it. Just a way to visualize how blockchain works. But um, in this case, it would be there's a lot of misleading information on social media about data and what's happening. So
Hmm.
there's a lot of organizations that are trying to make sure there's accurate data, like Hive, which is a group of crypto-minded researchers, engineers, and designers that have developed algorithms to map the actual epidemiologists to follow on Twitter. So they're trying to eliminate a lot of false information.
Hmm. Hmm. Going back to the digital dollar, I know the article talks about Ant Financial and how they're using like blockchain-based settlement system to offer like one-time payments to people affected by coronavirus. And now that we know in the U.S. there's going to be there's a stimulus package and adults are going to get payouts. It seems like they kind of put the digital payment capability on hold. They say it really can't be implemented. What do you think about that? Like, just as somebody with that knowledge of, how blockchain works, do you think is it really as difficult as they're saying? Like, why can't it be? I mean, because if we wait for checks, they're saying it could take up to 4 months for some people.
Right. Yeah. You know, it's funny because the CEO of Twitter came out today, and he also owns Cash App, which is
Oh, I didn't know he owned that.
yes, Jack Dorsey. We love Jack Dorsey. He basically said, send it through Cash App. We'll get it into everybody's hands, right? Um, that whole concept of sending checks to people
Mhm.
is not including all the people who might really need the money that don't have bank accounts,
Right.
right? So I think what Libra, which was Facebook's project, was trying to do was bank the unbanked, so to speak. And so a lot of that discussion came up in the context of the stimulus plan
Mhm.
and the digital dollar, because, who could effectively distribute this? Um, well, Libra's been working on it for a long time, and maybe they were going to partner with the U.S. government to get this money into people's hands and the unbanked. And those discussions may still be happening for all we know.
Mhm.
So I think, what do you think? Do you think that um, the country has reached this time where the existing financial system is failing, and so it becomes that much more important to have digitized dollars or even Bitcoin?
I don't know. I mean, that you and I differ a little bit in our what we see as success, I think, for Bitcoin. And I'm sure we'll talk about this later about like mass adoption or not. And I don't know. I still feel like Bitcoin was never really meant to be adopted by everybody. And I don't know. I don't really want to. Don't know if we have enough time to get into all of those reasons, but it's such a hard call to make because um I feel like the individuals who need the money from the stimulus the most, um, I would never want digital money or Bitcoin to be adopted out of desperation.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's a great idea for Jack Dorsey to propose Cash App, but I mean, and yes, a lot of people who don't even have homes or access to banking, they probably have smartphones, so it's probably feasible.
Right.
But how do you ensure, is this where we need a blockchain, or we just put the US Census on the blockchain and make sure, like, I wouldn't even know how to go about like just ensuring that everybody who is eligible, and then is all that information. I think I was reading the fact that they're going to base the how to send at this point, it sounds like, a fiat money or US dollars for sure, through whatever means that somebody has specified on their 2018 tax return. So like I myself, I don't usually ask them to transfer to my account. I always ask for a check in the mail. I know that's so old school, but that's what I prefer. So it's just, yeah, all of that information is, would have to be put somewhere. And I don't know if I really want all of that information for everybody collectively in one database, even though, yeah, it might not be mutable, but is it still like, do you think it would have to be, would it be made public? Like, how would you make sure that information didn't leak? Just because it can't change doesn't mean we want it leaked. I don't know, it's such a odd, weird question to,
Right.
like, yeah.
Well,
Like,
yeah, Bitcoin has never been hacked.
right.
And so, and most people would claim that it's not hackable.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it just comes down to, I don't even know. Like if I had to decide, for everybody, I don't know. I just don't, I feel like this technology is so powerful that I would hate for it to be adopted out of desperation. And if this is how digital currencies is introduced to like the masses,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want them to think that a digital currency run by the government is what Bitcoin is, because that's the opposite of what Bitcoin is.
That's right.
But just like when Libra made the news last year, everybody was like, oh, it's a cryptocurrency, but actually all of its characteristics are the opposite of what people who are hardcore Bitcoiners love about Bitcoin.
That's right.
But yeah, I mean, I'm in the position, I believe, where I could wait for whatever amount I'm going to get from the stimulus. But I mean, not everybody can. I mean, a lot of people are out of work right now and they're having.
Right. Well, and the other thing is that actual printing of money is dirty and has germs, right? So a lot of what this pandemic has done is accelerate the need to eliminate actual cash.
Yeah, exactly. But not to play devil's advocate again, but is this something that can only be solved by doing away with like physical dollars? Like, I mean, I think this, like, one thing that I've noticed from as a result of this pandemic, like I belong to a gym that I used to frequent like almost every day. And what I noticed was that like the hand sanitizer station has never been more popular than the last few weeks that I was there. It's like people never really exercised proper hygiene to begin with. I think that's something that's been highlighted. So
absolutely.
I mean, yeah, this is where like I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I wonder like, are we at the point of like, oh, the germs and like how they're transmitted is so bad that it can't be like alleviated through like hygiene habits that clearly like as a country we haven't been like exercising washing our hands every 20 minutes like we should. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if we're at that point yet. And it's unfortunate that we are having to make this decision right now out of urgency and not really thinking long term. Like, is that the reason why like the digital, like money is going to go digital, because we waited too long to implement like proper hygiene habits. And now like we're at the point where people need the money. What's the best way to get it to them? What do you think in terms of a digital dollar versus just regular paper checks and bank transfers?
Yeah, I think this was already a train in motion, and I think that the crisis just accelerates certain things that were already happening, and makes more people realize the benefits of what was already being argued. And so, like Giancarlo, Crypto Dad, the former head of the CFTC, has an organization like the Digital Dollar Federation, where he's been lobbying for a while now on the Hill to get this into effect, as not to be left behind every other country that announced some version of a central bank digital currency after Libra was announced. So it will be interesting to watch. But let's talk about artificial intelligence, because that's another big area that's being used right now in the pandemic.
Right.
It's it's facilitating the use of telehealth or telemedicine, in terms of people providing their symptoms and then not like a full diagnosis, but kind of categorizing people into certain sections or categories that they can be directed to proper hospitals. And I think that is really getting at the heart of what's at this crisis, is overwhelming the hospitals, or trying to flatten the curve so that the hospitals are not overwhelmed. So what do you think about that? And like China moves half of its medical care online during the crisis.
Yeah, I think it's interesting and essential. I do have a family member who is a physician, not in the ER or at a hospital, but at a general family practice. And I know that they are overwhelmed right now with with the problem that's only exacerbated with the lack of proper information, because not only do they deal with people who are actually sick, they also have to address people who think they might be sick, or think that they are at risk of getting sick. So I think AI in terms of automating processes that are really just mundane menial tasks, to allow, you know, doctors and like the humans to do the tasks that only they can do. I think it's a good thing. There was a company that I heard of called Behold AI, and they just got FDA clearance. I don't think that they're commercially adopted yet, because they just got FDA clearance, but they have a technology that employs AI to look at CAT scans of the lung and determine if the symptoms of pneumonia are indicative of coronavirus. And it's still very early stages, but I think that type of technology is great, because that's something that, you know, you think of a CAT scan, it's just a very time consuming process, and that alleviates the physicians from having to run that process. But in terms of, I'm not sure exactly what what are they doing in terms of AI to track and diagnose?
Yeah, they are using those CAT scans, and essentially each COVID patient needs more than 2,000 of them. Could you imagine?
Wow.
While they're hospitalized. And then can you imagine manually reading and comparing the image data from each of them, and then the errors that happen because you're fatigued or you just couldn't get to them, so you couldn't adjust a treatment plan in time. So this speeds up the entire process, and I think as long as the data that's going into an AI algorithm is accurate, then you're getting better results coming out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, unlike the digital dollar where I'm just like not sure, I think this technology is, I mean, clearly there's just too much data. Like if you're on Twitter, I mean, we see it all the time. Like, is this state flattening its curve or not? Is this state flattening its curve? And it's just really, we think we need more sophisticated data aggregators to just like, or I mean, I'm sure they are already are. It's just I feel like I don't know what the US is doing in terms of employing AI to track the spread and diagnose. It seems like a lot of the numbers are.
There are a lot of US startups doing it as well. CloudMedX is one of them. I know that's, it kind of works like Waze, where you have crowdsourced data that's going into, like Waze tells you the best traffic route. Well, this is crowdsourced on symptoms. And so they are analyzing those and then directing you to the nearest hospital that can treat those symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
But what's also interesting is China's use of robotics and drones.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that these are normally used to do deeds that are dirty, dull, or dangerous. And here, the operative word being dangerous. And you have robots that can go into, with ultraviolet lights that go kill viruses and bacteria in certain rooms and are controlled by health workers. And then you also have Chinese officials that have been deploying drones to patrol public places. Wow. Or spray disinfectant, or do thermal imaging to track whether people have fevers or aren't wearing face masks and violating their quarantine rules.
Yeah.
Do you think the US would ever use any of those?
Yeah, I think they would. I mean, aren't they already employing the National Guard? Like they were just there in Rhode Island this weekend tracking plates of people with New York plates to make sure that if they had just come in from the state that they needed to go into quarantine for 14 days. So they're already doing it at a small scale. So I think we're going to need to, because right now, as we were talking about earlier today, like there are workers from Amazon and Instacart on strike, and I completely understand why they are, because they are, of course, everybody, like so many people are at home and they need food, but I mean, we can't ask it's such a hard ask to have these people have to, like some of these people were saying, choose on a daily basis, am I going to feed my family or am I going to get paid? And maybe we just need to have these individuals become drone operators or operate the robots and deliver the food from these warehouses to the people, because it's.
Yeah, that is happening actually. So Amazon has a lot of its workforce in robots. A lot of those factories and warehouses are automated. So I don't know about Instacart, but I'm kind of surprised to hear Amazon, because I know they're very much up on that. Mm-hmm. And then there are these Starships carts, which are little rolling delivery carts that were being used a lot on college campuses and whatnot to deliver pizza. And now they're using them to deliver medicine and communicate with isolated people. So yeah, I mean, I think the more that we could use these things for the greater good, it's going to be better for everybody.
Yeah. I mean, I'm in full support of using big tech and AI, big data, facial recognition. Well, I don't know facial recognition, but all the other ones for sure. I think I just worry about when all this is done. I mean, how does that change the landscape of all these people who, you know, were temporarily replaced by robots? I mean, that's a continual conversation anyway, and that was already happening before. Like, are we going to be replaced by robots? And essentially, like, the positive way to look at it is that it leaves room for people to be more creative.
Right.
So it might be too soon to even just go that route. And I think all the big technological like disruptions in the last few centuries, and I mean, we've clearly like haven't run out of ways for human beings to make money and survive. So, but yeah, I think I'm in support of these initiatives. I just it's um, what I just see on from following the news. And to be clear, I do get most of my news from Twitter, for better or for worse. I just think what I see is just a clash of national power, state power, and um, you know tech individuals who have a lot of power, like Jack Dorsey, who are all not necessarily on the same page, and maybe they don't need to be on the same page. Maybe they are all supposed to be doing things differently. So, yeah, I'm not for the digital dollar yet, but all these other aspects of tech, I think I'm definitely in support of seeing what they can do to get this virus under control.
Yeah, well, it will certainly be interesting to watch as things unfold, and we'll definitely be tracking it. So we want our listeners to come back in and see the positives and the negatives of, if there are any, of tech, and how we are fighting the battle against the pandemic.
Yeah, and if you have a question or about something in your home state that's going on, and or curious about something you see, please let us know. We will include all the ways to contact us in our show notes.